Okay, gang, here we go. 1, 4, 6, 5. The capo on the 5th fret. 1, 4, 6, 5. Capo on the 7th fret. 1, 4, 6, 5. And there's 2 other positions too. So these are sounds that we hear every day, but some people still have trouble picking those chords out by ear. So I thought I would tackle that today. This is the point in the video where most YouTubers will tell you something along the lines of, by the end of this video, you'll be able to hear any chord on the fretboard and identify it by ear. But that's just not how music works. I'd rather shoot straight with you guys. That being said, I'm hopefully going to give you guys some tools in this video to help develop your ear over time, rather than just coming to terms with the fact that, oh, I just can't do this, and the people that can were born with some gift that I don't have. I don't think that's really the case. And we're going to do this by talking about 2 different approaches to this that kind of work together. One is pattern recognition, and number 2 is identifying the emotional fingerprint of all the diatonic chords that belong to a particular key. I promise to keep this next section as quick as I can, but I think you guys need to hear it. So speaking of shooting straight, I've started to figure out the YouTube game. There's a formula to this that people follow to maximize clicks. And it starts with a super quick intro, then there's a payoff. And this is where they lie to you and hit you with, master the fretboard in 15 minutes as long as you stick around to the end of this video kind of pitch. And that's just not how music works, like I said earlier. So I don't do that because it's not good for business long term. The ad revenue from people watching these videos is very little for me, but the profit that comes from YouTube funneling traffic into my guitar course makes doing these videos feasible for me and my family situation. So rather than getting 100,000 views in each video, giving out false promises just to kind of scrape in that short-term ad revenue, I would much rather put out content that's going to get 10,000 views per video with a higher quality viewer like you guys. They're going to subscribe to the channel and see what I have coming back each week to it, to where I have a more of a long-term trust-oriented channel. And that's why, thanks to you guys, we've grown the channel to 75,000 subscribers, which we hit this week, which is great for the first. I've been doing this seriously for about 1.5 years now. And I really appreciate you guys doing that. But still, 80% of you guys that watch these videos aren't subscribed yet. So if you can hit that subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it. Helps grow the channel and get these videos out to some more people. And if you like this teaching style, please check out that course, Nicky V's Fretboard Mechanics. It's a way of organizing the fretboard so you can play freely in any key anywhere on the neck. Put your hand down and just basically be able to express yourself. It's no tab, no licks, no stylistic anything. It's just a pure organization of the fretboard that gives you a practice routine to where consistently over time you can have actual gains on the instrument. So let's get into it. Enough of the sales pitch. All the diatonic chords that belong to a particular key have a certain emotional fingerprint to them, or an emotional connotation you can associate with them. So the 1 chord, the G major right there in the key of G, is very stable. It feels like home. That's typically the easiest to identify. It just feels like everything's stable again. But when we go to the 4 chord, people will miss this one. They'll get it confused with the 5 a lot of the time. And the 4 chord has a degree of ambiguity to it because it can go a few different directions. So you can hear it going up to the 5, then back down to the 1, or you can hear the 4 kind of going down to the 2, or it can go to the 6. It's slightly directionless, but the main identifier is the fact that it has a slight lift from the 1, but it doesn't feel like it necessarily wants to push back to the 1. So that's kind of a tricky one to hear for most people. And it also does this strange thing to where it can, depending on context, it can also sound kind of sad even though it's a major chord. But when we go to the 5 chord, so there's 1, 4, that 5 chord has a lean to it. It wants to lean and push back to the 1. It kind of wants to resolve back there. And the reason for that is because it has so many chord tones in it that are wanting to push back up to that 1, the way the voice leading works. And so it is demanding that it resolves. And so that is the unique identifier we can associate with the 5 chord to help us identify when it comes up. If we're just listening to music and there's a chord that seems like it's leaning back to something or leaning back to home, it might be a 5 chord. That's a good indicator for it. To where the 4 chord might seem a little bit more directionless, but it still seems like a lift up from the 1. Now the 6 minor chord, the E minor in the key of G, has a certain sadness to it because it's a minor chord, right? Minor, sad, major, happy, typically. But at the same time, the 6 has a strength to it that I think is kind of unique to itself. It's very sure of itself. And that is the emotional fingerprint that I typically lean on right there whenever I'm picking out a 6 minor chord. It's slightly reflective and it has the sad minor-y thing, but it still has this kind of boldness to it. So keep that in mind. Then we get to the 2 minor. It's naturally, inherently kind of sad. We're in the key of G just for context. We'll get to that chord right there. It's very unsettled. It also kind of wants to go somewhere. It wants to push up to a 5, back to the 1, but you can also hear it going down to 1 because of the bass motion going. So try to hear which direction it's going. If you can hear it going either direction, a lot of the time that indicates that it can possibly be a 2 minor. And then we get to the 3 minor. And the 3 minor is, to me, very easy to pick out. It has like a degree of built-in nostalgia to it. And it's just pull your heart out sad. Like if a 3 minor chord is in a song, she's definitely not coming back. There's just no question about it. If you hear that 3 minor, she's gone. But it's also incredibly beautiful. Just listen to that. Like you hear that 3 minor in there, and it tends to jump out as like a very emotional chord. It's just like one that's like, oh, there's so much color and beauty in that. It's most likely a 3 minor. So quick little review of all those. 1 strong, 4 gives you a lift, 5 leans back to 1 typically. 6 minor has a strength and boldness to it, but a little bit of sadness. 2 minor sounds unsettled. 3 minor, she's not coming back. So this is the part of the video where we ask you guys to let us know in the comments how you hear each one of these, or what's your emotional descriptor for each one of these chords. That's just how I hear them, and from my other music nerd buddies that I talk with, they kind of share similar thoughts about these, so hopefully that helps you guys out a little bit. When you take an ear training course in college or online, what it typically is a teacher sitting there on a piano, and they play the 1 major, and then they play the 4 major, and they go back to the 1. And then they play the 1 to the 5 back to the 1. And then over time, they hope that you start to develop the ability to differentiate the difference between a 1 to a 4 and a 1 to a 5. And that does work. I think it especially works for younger players because the way their minds soak things up whenever you're 16 to 20 years old. You tend to kind of grasp these things a little quicker. It's the way everything works cognitively. But most people that are getting serious about learning guitar are not necessarily between the ages of 16 to 20. A lot of them are 30 to 60 years old. And I think you have to approach it differently because the way the mind works when you get a little higher in age. And so that's how I've come up with what we're getting ready to talk about now. Most of us grew up listening to guitar music or still listening to guitar music rather than hearing just isolated chords on a piano bounced between 1 and 4 and 1 and 5. And so I think it makes more sense to train ourselves to identify the nuances of what different guitar voicings sound like in different capo positions on the neck, focusing on the nuance of what voicings sound like or the characteristics of certain strings, whether a third's on the top or how many bass notes are in there. Are there open strings happening? And you start to pick up on this pattern recognition. Okay, this is what a D shape to a G shape sounds like. I'm not talking about perfect pitch where you can just call out, oh, that's an E flat major chord. That's not something that's realistic to talk about. I think what I do think is realistic is being able to hear the difference between a D shape on a guitar to a G shape and being able to identify when that happens through repeating it over and over again over a period of time on this instrument. And you start to be able to recall it and be like, and recognize it whenever you hear it, which is going to let you know that that's a 1 to a 4, for example. So let's learn ear training on guitar from actually playing guitar. So we're learning to hear the shape. So starting out right here in the open position, that G is all 1s and 5s when you play it like that. There's no thirds in that chord, so it has this very strong boldness to it. It's very stable. Now, some people play a G like this, and there you're kind of hearing that jangle of the open strings happening. It's a particular sound that you start to cue on after time. And you hear those thirds, which have a little bit of a softness to them in the chord. Now, if we put a capo on our 3rd fret and play a G chord, or E-shaped G chord, it's a different sound. I'm hearing that 3rd in there. I'm also hearing the fact that I have this real strong 5th stack on the bottom. I'm hearing those in there. And it sounds like the bar chord we all play when we're just playing like this, right? Now if we move up to the 5th fret, to me this is the one that jumps out the most. If we play a D-shaped G, that 3rd on the top right there has an inherent brightness to it. And speaking of brightness, it kind of has like the Here Comes the Sun thing. Right? And so that particular interval spacing right there of 1, 5, 1 with a 3, and it doesn't have a lot of bass notes in it. You don't hear unless you're in drop D or something, but you don't hear a lot of body in the low end on that chord. It has this sparkliness on the top end that is so unique to itself. Now if we move our capo up to our 7th fret and play a C-shaped G, there's a lot of thirds in that chord right there. We got 1 here and 1 there. And thirds a lot of the time can get a little bit wacky on the tuning. They get a little bit wobbly. And that's because the whole just tuning versus equal temperament conversation, which is a bigger topic for another day. But thirds tend to jump out sonically because of their softness. And there's a little bit of a melancholy in them depending on context. And this shape also has like a kind of a distinctive folkiness to it for like that finger picking classic. That kind of thing. So it jumps out at me like that. Then if we move our cape up to our 10th fret, we have an A-shaped G. I'm hearing that third on top. Some people play it like this. We get the fifth ringing out. It has a folkiness to it too. Cape it up this high, it's really bright. So I'm gonna move it down here so you can hear it a little more clearly. That is a particular sound to it. And to me, that is very James Taylor-y. That's the classic James Taylor hammer on the 2nd fret B string kind of sound. That's where my mind goes when I think of the A shape. So hearing each of those individually, hearing like a G shape versus an A shape versus an E shape might be a little bit difficult. And so one thing we can do to help us is kind of rely on the other unique identifiers of the other diatonic chords in those keys to help us kind of figure out which motion is going where and how those voicings relate to each other. So if we play in this open position, for example, I'm going to go through every capo position. I'm going to play a 1, 4, 6 minor, 5. And we're going to talk about the emotional fingerprint on each one of those motions as well and some other little nuanced things that I think will help you guys out. So starting out here, I'll play the G with all the thirds in it. I hear all those open strings jangling. Now if I go to a 4 chord, there's my real subtle lift, right? I heard a nice little subtle lift. I can hear it also going up to a 5 from there. I could hear it going back down to 1. I could hear it going down to 6 minor. And that 6 minor has a strength to it. It's very bold, it's reflective, it's kind of sure of itself. And so that's where I would lean with this, but then all of a sudden we shoot up to a 5, and that 5 is wanting to resolve so bad back to 1. And so going on that little emotional story right there helps guide us through that chord progression. And if you do this with different variations of this chord progression, I just used a 4 chord thing right now because by process of elimination, it'll help you figure out the 2 and the 3 later on. And this is what tends to come up a lot is these 4 chords. So taking those through each of the different capo positions now, you start to learn the characteristics of each position. So let's go to the 3rd fret. So the 1 has that stability to it, it's the tonic. I'm hearing that 3rd, kind of in the middle of the voicing, the softness, kind of, if I'm visualizing all the notes spread around, the softness is in the middle of the chord right there. And now when I go to my 4 chord, there's my subtle lift. I'm hearing that 3rd on the B string. I can also get the high E string open involved in there and listen for that. When I go to my 6, I can't play that open E minor down there. I have to shoot up to here. So I'm hearing all of those notes shift up right there. Everything's going up to accommodate that voicing. And then I go down to my 5, which wants to go back to 1. And notice that the voicing for the 4 and the 5 are also the same. Back down to 1. Then we go to our next capo position. This is the obvious one for a lot of people starting out. When they hear that, the here comes the sun sound, right? So there's our 1 chord, and here's our 4 chord. The only thing that's confusing about this particular position is the fact that that lift is not as obvious for the 4 chord right there, because we have all this brightness in the top end for the 1, and now the 4 chord is warmer and more solid actually. But when we go to our 6 chord, we hear that jump, because the 4 chord can still go to 6, it could go to 5, or it could go back to 1. So we have our 6 minor now, down to that, you hear the tuning issue right there on that? That 3rd is sharp, but I have to have it right there to get that 1 in tune. And so that tuning issue, you can listen for that. It's gonna be on a record, it's there. Back to our 1 with the sparkle on the top end. Then we go to our 7th fret. We're gonna play a C-shaped G. There's our 1. Okay, now we're gonna basically have to play an F chord to accommodate the C major, the 4 chord. So we have 1 to 4. Some people play that like this, which is a very clear lift, but if you hear that bass movement going. Okay, then our 6 minor. You hear the clearness of those open strings. I'm hearing that real sparkly top end on those open strings jangling. And then to our 5, super strong because it's all 1s and 5s. There's no 3rds in that voicing. Back to our 1, and it pushes back to 1. So that's a pretty obvious one too. And that 1 also has that kind of folkiness to it with all the softness of those 3rds. So then we go to our final one. Our fingers can get a little bit squished up here, so I might end up taking this down depending on how this goes. But you have an A-shaped G, and then you have your 4 chord right there. That's a huge intervallic shift happening. So that D shape just jumps out for your 4 chord. That's a C major, even though we're playing a D shape. And then you get to your 6 minor, which is going to be like an F sharp minor chord if you're playing it down here open. But I'm hearing the full frequency spectrum of that because I'm playing all 6 strings. And so out of the A position, the James Taylor position, that 6 minor, a lot of the time, you'll be hearing the bigness of the full frequency spectrum of strumming across all 6 strings. And then you go down to your 5, which my tuning's getting weird, capoed up this high, but you hear the bar chordness of that E shape, which pushes right back to 1. You hear that bass movement going at the end. So the next steps after that would be to do the exact same exercise, but change the order of the chords around. Do 1, 5, 6, 4, or 4, 6, 5, 1, and switch those up. To maybe don't always start on the tonic, so it's not quite as obvious. You can hear when it comes up. Not every song starts and ends on the 1. A lot of them do, though. So focus on, like I said, I sound like a broken record, the nuance of the individual shapes and how they are related to each other. Focus on how a D shape sounds going to a G shape. And you can do all this not in the same key. So if I did that same progression, if I just played like a 1, 4, 6 minor 5 and all open now, I'm still listening for those characteristics. It's not key specific. I just did it all in G to show you how it moves with the fretboard. But if I did 1, 4, 6, 5, but then I went to the key of E and played 1, 4, 6, 5, you're seeing that relationship like I did whenever I was on the capo on the 3rd fret. Now let's pretend I'm in G with my capo on the 5th fret, and I'd play D shapes, so I'd have 1, 4, 6, 5. That's so unique. That sounds so much different than playing the E shape, for example. And then we go to the C shape, we'd have 1, 4, 6, 5. Then we go to the A shape, we'd have 1, 4, 6, 5. I hear that full frequency spectrum on that chord right there. And the voice leading of the bass movement going down and then going back to 1. And so practice these in different capo positions across the neck, do them all in one key up, then try to do them in different individual spots. And the more variation you can come up with, the better. It's going to help cue your ear to this. So whenever you hear it in a song at some point, because we typically listen to a lot of guitar music if you're a guitar player, you're going to be able to pick out those things. You're going to hear Here Comes the Sun and be like, oh, wait, that's a D shape. And then it goes down to a 4 and then up to a 5. You'll hear those things happening because you've sat here and played that chord down to that one and then up to the 5, back to the 1. You can start to pick that out by ear because you've repeated this and you've focused on it rather than just passively being like, okay, I just can't do this, I guess. And make no mistake about it, this stuff really just does take time. And some people are born with more of a gifting than others, and some people have to work harder at it. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think that whole gifting spectrum is quite as wide as people think it is. I think most people are a little more towards the center, and some people just have better, and some people are just a little bit better at figuring these things out early on. But if you didn't figure it out early on, don't let that stop you. You can still chip away at this. Are you going to have the absolute, super huge gains that a 16-year-old would doing this? Probably not, but you can still get better at it. And this is a fun thing. Learning guitar is fun, so keep it fun. But if you want to get better at it, you got to put a little bit of work in. So if you guys like this kind of stuff, like I said, please like and subscribe. Please check out that guitar course, Nicky V's Fretboard Mechanics, if you like this one-on-one teaching style. And you guys are the high-quality viewer if you made it this far into the video. Really appreciate you guys. Thanks.